So the Middle East or China will have weapons. And we saw that with COVID, they'll have sophisticated technology that poses a threat to us. And we will think that because they have cell phones or they watch a podcast or they twerk or something, that they're like us. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily the truth.
You are a historian. You are a classicist. When we look to antiquity, are there any examples of nations or cities that have experienced this type of rapid demographic change and made it out on the other side? I mean, I think we focus a lot on the negative cases, of course, but are there ways, are there negative cases and positive cases of this?
There is. If you look at what I'd call late Republic, early imperial literature, it's graphic, and there's about 9 authors. You have Juvenal Satires. It was written somewhere around 60, 70 AD. You have Petronius Satyricon. It's a novel about kind of a satire, but it's pretty scary, about 60 AD. You have Catullus' poems, about 50. You have Horace's. I could go on. You get The Lives of the 12 Caesars and the impression you get is that
very funny.
Yeah, you get the Italian agrarian mindset, protocol, morality, and it's now globalized and it's diluted. And the places where Rome has occupied are wealthier. They're more naturally wealthy. In the East, they have more precious metals, silver, gold, better, more fertile land in the Nile Delta, etc. And so there's a lot of money being made in this global system of trade that Rome created. And one of the things that's happened is Rome has now become from 300,000 to over 1 million. And the number of people who are Italian natives, given, 1 million slaves came in from Gaul alone. And the number of people who are Italian or reflect that in the literature is considered dwindling, eroding, and you've got too many people from all over the world that are not on the same page as far as Latin knowledge. It's that famous rivers of blood speech that's in Virgil's Aeneid, that we've got too many streams coming into the Roman River. But there is a sense, at least, that money, globalized money. Trimalchio is the kind of the anti-hero of the Satyricon. He's a buffoonish guy somewhere from the East with a Semitic name. And we don't know where he's from, but he's fabulously more wealthy than any Italian because he's a master of international trade, shipping across the Mediterranean. But he's very gross, and the dinner is just everything that today we consider shocking, or at least traditionalists do, is in that novel. Transgenderism, transvestism, polymorphous sex, fixations with bizarre food, dress, nudity, everything.
Everything's become a fetish.
Yes, yeah. A fetish. And the subtext of that, written by an old Roman noble, Petronius, who's a brilliant satirist, is that Rome is now much more wealthy. It's much more advanced. It's much more technologically. The novel takes place in the Bay of Naples, so the house is very sophisticated, and it bears a lot of resemblance to what we know from Herculaneum and Pompeii that have been excavated. So it's an accurate novel, but it comes at the price of morality. I mean, there's pedophilia in it. There's everything. And there's Eastern, Catullus' poem, the Attis poem, it's all about somebody who conducts a transgendered surgery on himself in an Eastern fit.
Beyond like eunuch castration.
Well, he's cut his testicles off because he's under the sway of this Sibylle who's been introduced, and he's in this ecstasy, Bacchiant. And then he wakes up at the poem, and he at the shore crying because he's now no longer a Westerner. And so, but anyway, the literature from 40 BC to 100 AD talks about that transition. And when you say there's good and bad, it's very clear that there's much more wealth. There's much more technology. There's much more leisure, at least, but it's also there's no moral restraint. There's no Italian rural code, and that's the big elephant in the room when you read Virgil's Eclogues or that the Italian agrarian code that won the battles against Carthage or created the empire, they're all gone now, and people are effeminate.
It is this era of Roman decadence that it's to back up. It's interesting that Mary Beard places the climax of Rome's greatness as the expansion of Roman citizenship, essentially, too. And we're kind of talking about that time period. And though Cicero teaches us that what is expedient is also morally right, from my understanding and my reading of Roman history, it seems like that is much more about expedience and standardization and Roman statesmen dealing with how to actually manage such a large empire. And there's, I think, modern readers, when they pick up SPQR, they tend to read it as, oh, isn't this such a great thing? Rome was some sort of creedal nation that had some liberal values or something like that, and that it wasn't the case at all.
Yeah, the empire's broke, and in 212 his declaration says everybody who's residing on Roman lands is a citizen for tax purposes. So he could tax them and unleash the tax collectors. But by then, there was, I guess, the feeling is in art, and we have art, and we have inscriptions, graves inscriptions, we have a lot of evidence from various sources, is that whatever this conglomeration is, it doesn't have a lot to do with 3rd or 2nd century Roman life. And there's no republic anymore, and the provinces, especially in the east, is where the money. So when this thing splits apart in 470s, it's no accident. The Byzantines will live for 1,000 years. That's where the money is. That's where the science is taking place. But that's also where the Romans are saying they have this word luxus, luxury and decadence. And it's very similar to the United States in the sense of there was this kind of agrarian American code that you see in movies of the 1930s and 40s, and now we're sort of a globalized, powerful, wealthier, but people are less happy, or they don't seem to reflect what the founders thought the country should be. It's the same dichotomy.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next question, which is, you might subscribe to some sort of cycle of regimes that was often a focus of ancient writers, whether that's Plato or Aristotle, or later Greeks like Plutarch, who's living in the Roman era. If we're likening that 1st, 2nd century Roman Empire to what we see now in the United States, where do you think the United States is in this cycle of regimes? Is the age of the American Republic over and it's the age of American empire? Has the age of empire really even begun?
No, I think we're somewhere in the that period between the Battle of Actium and the death of Octavian Augustus, 31 to 14. We're in a transitional period where our globalization is the modern equivalent of an empire. Because it is, if you think about it, run by the United States. As far as I looked at the top 6 corporations in the world, I think 5 of them are American: Google, Apple, NVIDIA. And then everybody wears a suit and tie if they're a diplomat, and jeans are everywhere. Everybody's got a cell phone. Silicon Valley is, for all of its problems, is still a cutting edge as far as world technology. Everybody emulates the United States. China. Every time I look at a Chinese airplane or a Chinese uniform, I just think that they stole it from us. So it's kind of like what's happening, but there's still a sense inside the United States that we're still operating under Republican principles. But there's a doubt that these next generations are going to be able to continue that America, because of this. There's no civic education, and they've been brought up on globalism. You don't judge people. It's this moral relativism. And when you have There's no problem if you want 16% of your population foreign born, then you have to have a immersion program of integration, assimilation, adaptation. We don't.
Yeah, and our version of that is, well, why don't we just take the public school and make everybody speak Spanish rather than having good English English tutors or English studies. I think it's interesting that you mention a time of transition, because as we look to the world, as we look to foreign affairs, there's a lot of talk about China, of course, rising. There's a lot of talk about multipolarity. It's interesting that this transitional period has come with rising sentiments of nationalism in the United States and other countries in Europe. To be direct about it, is the unit of the nation state fit for the challenges that the 21st century is going to pose? Because I think a lot of people think multipolarity, resurgence of nation states, resurgence of national sovereignty. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. You could be dealing with 5, 6, 7 different regional empires or regional hegemons that would still be defined as multipolar.
Yeah, I think we're in a race between Westernization, which is really globalization, and whether that's going to make things uniformly in the West interest, or whether it's going to empower them technologically, financially, culturally, but their indigenous or innate systems are still going to be very hostile to us, but they're going to be very dangerous. So the Middle East or China will have weapons. They'll have, and we saw that with COVID, they'll have sophisticated technology that poses a threat to us, and we will think that because they have cell phones or they watch a podcast or they twerk or something, that they're like us. And that's not necessarily the truth.